Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. The Montreal Canadiens regular season is over. As you know, they didn't make the playoffs. But you know, when your school year is over, everyone gets a report card. Some get 90s, some get 80s, some get 70s, some get 60s, and some fail, and they got to go to summer school. Did anyone pass the test this year for the Montreal Canadiens? Who got the highest grade in the first half of the season? Who got it in the second half of the season? How did the coaches grade? How was the special teams? We dissect all of it with a man who has watched every single Montreal Canadiens game this season, Dan Robertson, TSN 690, play-by-play guy, is coming up right here. I'm Marinaro. It's the Sick Podcast.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro. The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Sports entertainment like no other. Brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense by nature, and La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast, brought to you by 8.6 Beer, intense like me by nature, for those who follow their instinct and live their passions in order to make their mark. And of course, La Cage. If the last time you went to La Cage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you go back to La Cage. The menu will surprise you. I was there on Saturday celebrating my mother-in-law's birthday and Mother's Day for my mother-in-law and for my wife. And I had the 40-day aged AAA steak. Absolutely awesome. My mother-in-law had the Blitz burger with a fantastic poutine. I believe my son had the buffalo chicken poutine, which he enjoyed very, very much as well. And, of course, the all-dressed nachos and the 24 buffalo wings, chicken wings. It was awesome. So much so that I love La Cage that I'm going back. I'm going to go back on Saturday, May 21st. And by the way, if you want to meet up, you're welcome to drop by. We're going to be celebrating our 1-year anniversary party of the Sick Podcast at La Cage. It was supposed to, it was officially our 1-year anniversary, I think, several months ago. But we waited to do the event because of COVID. And then when we wanted to do it in April, which I believe was on the 24th, we decided to postpone that date because several of our team members had COVID or there was COVID in their family. So now everyone is clear. The weather is beautiful. It's going to be a great celebration. And we hope to see you there. I would imagine, look, spots are limited, so give them a call. We're going to be at La Cage de Carry at 5485 Rue des Jockeys to RSVP. If you're looking for a place to have supper that night and figure, hey, I want to meet Tony Marinaro or I want to meet the team of the Sick Podcast, RSVP by calling 731-2020. And it's going to be, we're going to have a good time. We'll see you then. Hopefully, our next guest can actually be there too. I'll bring him in. He's TSN 690's Montreal Canadiens radio play-by-play guy, Dan Robertson. How you doing, bud?
I'm great, Tony. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you very much. If you're free on Saturday, May 21st, which I know you have to check your schedule because you're a very busy guy. If you're free, Dan, open invitation to you.
I appreciate it. I love Casual Sport. Haven't been there in too long, so it's time to change that, I think.
I had a picture of sangria the other night, which I shared with my father-in-law, and I'm telling you, some people make sangria better than others, and it went down just right. It was good. Yeah.
Excellent. No amaretto sour for you?
No, I didn't have any that night. I had some, okay. But you know what? The wings, oh my God. And the steak, fantastic. Anyway, I figured it's the end of the hockey season, almost like the end of the school season. And the Montreal Canadiens players, there should be a report card. And I figure who we're going to call. But the guy who actually had the chance to watch every single game and watch it from above. And Dan, I would imagine that no one will be able to grade them better than you.
Well, I hope so. And I think going into it, we know there won't be many A pluses across the board. It was, as we know, a really tough season. And by the time we got to the end of it, I think everybody was sort of, as much as we would like to have seen the Canadians in the playoffs, it was kind of you had to exhale and say, okay, we'll put that behind us. But there certainly were there always are. There's always bright spots in a dismal season. And we saw a number of those this year, I think.
Yeah. Why don't we do this? Why don't we take a look at the chart, which shows their offensive numbers in terms of goals, in terms of assists for, some of the players on the team, not all of them. But here's Nick Suzuki, 21 goals and 40 assists. Cole Caufield, 23 goals, 20 assists. Rem Pitlick, 15 goals, 22 assists. Mike Hoffman, 15 goals, 20 assists. Christian Dvorak, 11 goals and 22 assists. Josh Anderson, 19 goals, 13 assists. Jake Evans, 13 goals, 16 assists. Chris Weidman, 4 goals, 23 assists. Jeff Petrie, 6 goals and 21 assists. And Brendan Gallagher with 7 goals and 17 assists. That's your top 10 point getters. Quickly looking at it, Dan, when you take a look at that top 10, is there something that stands out more than something else?
I would not have expected Chris Weidman would lead the team in scoring among defensemen. And that's not a slight against Chris. He had a good season, but it's just kind of part and parcel of the year that the Canadians had. And obviously, Rem Pitlick at number 3, I mean, that was a nice story too. We know that they got him off waivers and he came in and injected some life into the Canadians. So that helped a bit. But really, and as I look at them too, Tony, maybe you're like me, I'm thinking like a tale of two seasons. Pre-coaching change, post-coaching change, and obviously a lot of numbers got inflated after the coaching change. But yeah, I mean, I look at Jake Evans. I thought he had a nice step forward this year, and he looked down at Gallagher, and I think injuries, and he could never find his footing. But across the board too, other than Suzuki, 61 points, not bad, but to lead a team with that, it kind of shows the kind of season they had offensively.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that, Dan. For me, one quick look at that chart. Let's bring it back up again for a second if we can. Maybe even keep it up if we can. But I take a look at that chart, which is up if you're watching us right now via YouTube or via Facebook. Of course, you'll be able to see the chart. If not, you can always listen to us via iHeartRadio. But I take a look at that chart and I take a look at those numbers, Dan, and I say those are numbers of a team that clearly didn't make the playoffs. And so they finished dead last in a 32-team league. And one quick look at those numbers where the top point getter gets 61 points. And then after that, it goes to 43 and 37 and 35 and 33 and 32 and 29 and 27, 27 and 24. That explains it, Dan.
It does, and it was that way from the get-go, wasn't it? I mean, they couldn't score. They were giving up tons of goals, and they got behind the 8 ball and never really got back. And I don't know if you're like me. It got to a point in the season where I'd be doing the broadcast, and I would say, like, for example, the Canadians have allowed at least 5 goals in 4 of their last 6 games. And there were all of these numbers that were really kind of depressing if you're a Canadians fan. And after a while, I just said, you know what? I'm going to stop beating that dead horse. This is a bad team, and I didn't keep throwing those numbers out anymore. So that's when we started, I think, to look for some improvements along the way. And on that side, we know what Caufield did in the second half of the season. He had a goal in his first 30 and then cranked it up later on. So, but no, I mean, really, and I think just because we didn't want to be negative, just guys like me and you probably, we stopped talking about how horrible the stats were because, I mean, across the board, offensively, defensively, special teams, they were at or near the bottom in pretty much every significant category.
All right, so we don't need the graphic anymore. We can get rid of it for now. Dan, do you and I agree that the best grade goes to Nick Suzuki?
Yeah, indeed. And for me, if I wanted to give him maybe a B plus, something like that, if we're looking at a letter grade, but the way his season started, there were games there, and I looked at this just before the last game of the season. I can't quite remember now, but there was a couple of gaps, like 8 games where he went without a point, and then he'd show up and have a really good game, and then would go a handful of games again without a point. It wasn't all his fault. I mean, everybody was struggling, but he really became more and more consistent as the season went on. And I give him credit, too, because he plays in every situation. He doesn't have a lot to insulate him as a second-line centerman to take away some of those big minutes. Yes, Dvorak is good to win defensive zone faceoffs, but really that's something that they need to address as they move ahead to try to get a good second-line centerman. And he didn't miss a game. And we know that he had a little problem with his back going down the stretch. He wasn't practicing, wasn't going to morning skates. So all in all, I think once he got it turned around, his consistency was pretty impressive.
All right. The second best grade goes to?
See, if I have to pause and I can't think of one, I'll have to say Cole Caufield. And again, it's a tale of two seasons. Even remember he scored his first goal in Washington, and I remember he put it in, but it was a left pad save by the goaltender. The puck had crossed the line. The goalie was back deep in his net. It was that tough for him to score that even when he thought he had one, he wasn't sure. But then they made the coaching change, and how much stock you want to put into that is the reason that Cole came around. That's debatable, but we saw the real Cole Caufield in the second half, and it was pretty exciting and pretty dynamic. So I would have to say, yeah, he'd get the second best grade, whatever that might be. If it's a B, maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, let's go to the other end of the spectrum here. Out of all the forwards, who do you think got the lowest grade? Or who got the lowest grade on your report?
Yeah, probably Brendan Gallagher. That jumps to mind, and I hate to say it because I love the guy, but and he missed a lot of time due to injury, and he could never really find his way back. And I'm a firm believer that a major reason is because he didn't have time to get a good workouts in and proper training in the off season. He was trying to play catch up all the way. So you know what? I'll say Gallagher. We saw Hoffman elevated in the scoring. That doesn't tell the whole story. He got a few points late. Even when he was scoring, he wasn't doing much. He's a guy who I think on a good team he fits. On a bad team, he's not really offering much. But I will reluctantly, and it pains me to say it, I'll say Gallagher.
Yeah. Yoel Armia struggled too. I mean, how many good games did Yoel Armia have in the 21-22 season?
I actually forgot about him, Tony. So there you go. And he went back to Finland a little bit early. But that guy, and we've told this story, we know it, he's enraging because when he is on, he is really good. But you're right. I would say, how many good games did he have? Maybe 3. And I think that's pretty accurate.
And they probably happened in the last 20 games of the season, right? Or 25 games. Like they hadn't happened. He hadn't had a good game. Doesn't seem like anyway in the first 60 games of the season. So, So Suzuki passes the year. Caufield on a great second semester report card, he passes the school year as well. Rem Pitlick, you talked about him, which I thought, you know what? If Rem Pitlick would have won the Jacques Beauchamp Award as the 4th star or the unsung hero, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. Ultimately, it went to Alexander Romanov, which was a great choice. Unfortunately for Pitlick, he hadn't played a lot of games, right? And I think if Pitlick would have played more, he could have been that guy. He passes the year as well, right?
Oh, for sure, especially with what he did early. And I like his game. And his numbers were okay in Minnesota, but they were so deep, and we still see it up front, that they didn't much have room for him anymore. So he fit well, really injected some life into the offense. The numbers were good with Montreal. I don't know where he fits or if he fits long term. I would think they would want him back. But yeah, overall, he had a good season. Interesting kid to talk to too. He's a likable guy, pretty sharp. So it was nice to watch him.
Let's do this because I have no idea which letter is a passing grade or a failing grade, but I do know that a 60 is a pass and under 60 is a fail. All right. So the highest grade goes to Suzuki. On 100, you would give him?
I would give Nick an 83.
An 83 for Nick Suzuki. Cole Caufield is next at the forward position. You'd give him?
I would say 78 for Cole.
78 for Cole. Would Rem Pitlick come third?
As forwards, yeah, I will say,
Let's take a look at the chart one more time. Our production team, back at Master Control if you can. There you have it. So Suzuki gets an 83. Caufield gets a 78. Rem Pitlick, third best forward?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, Dvorak came on late, so I would say somewhere between Pitlick and Dvorak, and I'd give Pitlick like a 75, I would say.
Okay, Dvorak, just a couple of points under, I guess.
Yeah, 74, 73. I liked That's a guy with a terrible start. A terrible
Yeah.
start. He couldn't find his. It looked like he was hurt. We know he's not a speed burner to begin with, but you know what? He's an excellent face-off man, and he really dug in the latter part of the season, and he was consistently putting up points too. And if you look at his points per game average coming into the season with Arizona and what it was this season, I think it's pretty much identical. So in the end, you got what you thought you would from Christian Dvorak.
If any of these players on this chart are your favorite players, sportbuffshop.com. You can shop all their licensed sports apparel, including hoodies, caps, t-shirts of your favorite team from all the major leagues, as well as our sick merchandise. Take a look at what I'm wearing today. Double shift your best players. Use code SICK15 for 15% off on all of their items. And a shout out to matrixhomefitness.ca. You can bring it home and discover a club quality workout in the comfort of your own home. Visit matrixhomefitness.ca. Dan Robertson, who I think was saying before, that Brendan Gallagher is going to take probably 3-4 weeks, maybe a month to rest and recover. And once he does, he'll probably get on that treadmill or he get on that stationary bike. And Brendan, if you don't have one, matrixhomefitness.ca. That's what you need in your home. I got one in my home. And look at the shape I'm in. Huh? All right. Okay. No comment there.
I should mention Evans too. Sorry to cut you off. I thought Jake Evans is right there with those guys too. And Jake had some injury problems at times, but I'm sure you would agree with me that when he was good, he's shown some offensive spark. So he's in that group, I think, with Pitlick and maybe slightly ahead of Dvorak now that I have another chance to think about it.
Well, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about Evans, and he might be the only guy of the forwards that's still in that 70s in terms of a grade category. Because in the 60s, I think there could be a couple, but I'm going to give Josh Anderson in the 60s because at the end of the day, he was a goal shy of 20 goals. It's not like scoring 20 goals in the National Hockey League is the easiest thing in the world. But I have to tell you, Dan, you talked about Armia, and, Anderson's probably a little bit less frustrating, but not that much less. He's very frustrating. He's got all the tools, and it just seems that, when he's on, he's on, but when he's off, and he's off too much for my liking.
Yeah, and I think about him, if you think about he and Armia, they're the same in that that's who they are. They'll tease you at times, but I will say in Josh's defense, he showed up last year in the playoffs when it really mattered. And I wondered too down the stretch if he was suffering from some kind of an injury because his explosiveness had kind of disappeared. But you're right, because, we know the story. He drags guys to the net. He's a powerful skater, shoots the puck pretty well, kind of a one-dimensional game, and they're trying to stretch that out a little bit. But yes, there's no doubt that when he's not on his game, he's kind of invisible, and that's not a good thing for the Canadiens.
So, a bunch of guys like Pizzetta and guys like Dauphin and Harvey Pinard, when he got called up, it's not a big sample size for him. But these guys gave you everything they had and more, right? So they get a passing grade. I think you would agree with that.
Yep.
But in terms of a failing grade, you gave it to Gallagher, right?
Yeah, I would have to give it to Gallagher. He'd probably say the same thing, and Armia as well.
Gallagher and Armia and Hoffman?
Hoffman he's right on that make or break line, right around 60. Again, the numbers weren't horrible if you look at them in the context of the team. But how many times did he turn the puck over? And I know those games didn't matter, but they matter, if you know what I mean. And sorry, go ahead.
No, you just brought up, we just talked about Josh Anderson, and I have something coming in. Our producers back at Master Control are telling me this. You ready for it?
I think I know what you're going to tell me, yeah.
Josh Anderson will represent Team Canada at the upcoming World Hockey Championships.
No, it's exciting. And, different guys turn it down for different reasons. We heard Suzuki say that he needed to get the rest, and Caufield too. So good on Josh. I always liked the World Championships ever since I was a kid, just because of that mix of guys from teams that don't make the playoffs. And it's interesting to see how the chemistry works, or if it does. So good on him, and I hope he has a good tournament.
All right, let's take a look at the goalies, where Montreal Canadiens general manager Kent Hughes said a couple of days ago, the only number one he has in the organization right now is Carey Price. The goalie numbers, we'll bring them up. There you go. Goalie stats this season. Jake Allen, goals against average, 330. Carey Price, 362. Sam Montembeault, 377. Save percentage, Jake Allen, 905. Sam Montembeault, 891. Carey Price, 878. So I understand it's a different context. I get it. Carey Price, a troubling season, was in the player assistance program, came back from an injury that set him back on a couple of occasions. But the general manager says at the end of the season that of his 3 goalies, the one who had the second best goals against average and the one who had the worst save percentage is the only number 1 he has in his organization. Your thoughts?
Well, that it's scary, and it's true too, right? And when he said that, my mind went to, okay, what about Jake Allen? But I think several years back, it was, I don't want to say proven, but we learned that Jake's a better number 2 goaltender and somebody who can fill in for stretches of time as a de facto number 1. But ultimately, he's not that guy, and it is a little bit scary because with Price, we don't know what's going to happen, and you can't have a good feeling about it, I don't think, going ahead. So, and it also makes me think, Tony, of over the last number of years, and I started this job in 2014, and long before that, yeah, okay, so they were paying him, and they're still paying him a lot of money. I get that. But when he was healthy, you didn't have to think twice about the goaltending position. So now you're thinking, okay, if he is done, if he can never even get, if he plays a little bit, can't get back to his former self, who is the guy down the road? Somebody outside the organization, you would have to think. But it is interesting. And you know what? I liked Allen's year. I know if you look at his numbers, they're not great. But, there's a night in San Jose, single-handedly won a game, and he battled. And I thought he had a pretty good season overall.
We got to put things in context, right, Dan? It's easy to say that Jake Allen and Samuel Montembeault probably didn't get a passing grade, which is 60 or more based on their stats. But what the stats don't tell you is this is a team that didn't bring back Eric Stahl. This is a team that lost Corey Perry. This is a team that didn't bring back John Merrill. This is a team that had Joel Edmondson and Paul Byron out with injuries. It's a team that saw Shea Weber basically unofficially retire, saw Phil Deneau leave for the Los Angeles Kings, Thomas Tatar leave for the New Jersey Devils, a team that had an extremely short summer, a team that was started the season demoralized because they had still, couldn't get over losing in the Stanley Cup final to Tampa and couldn't get over Carey Price and him not being ready to start the season. There were so many, everything that went wrong could have gone wrong that, I know it sounds odd, but based on all of that, I don't think Allen and Montembeault failed. I think they did pretty well, actually.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if you look at, so just to go back to Allen again, he had to shoulder quite a load. And it's not like this was the 77 Montreal Canadiens with the defense in front of him. And then he got hurt and probably got overworked. I thought they played him too much down the stretch. I didn't understand why they wouldn't put Montembeault in a little bit. I guess it doesn't matter. But if you look at Montembeault,
I know why.
Okay.
Double shift your best players. That's why.
Even when you're in 32nd place, I guess. But so it was tough to see him finish the season on injured reserve. Montembeault got here, and if you remember early, and it wasn't a great season for him, but he got better. He was allowing too many rebounds, I thought, early when he started with the Canadiens, and he admitted he was playing too far out of his net. So they worked with him, and he got better. Yeah, there were some horrifying nights, and there were nights when near the end of Dom Ducharme's tenure where he just couldn't get a save from his goaltenders. At that time, it was Montembeault and Primo, and you felt for the guy because they were getting blitzed every night. Overall, though, I think, Montembeault probably proved that, I don't know, he proved that he can be like a number 2 on a good team. I'm not sure, but he's not going to kill you, I guess, in the short term. Maybe that's damning with faint praise.
Yeah, he's, those tweeners that you have in the American Hockey League, right? Some of those guys that are too good for the American Hockey League, but they can do the job in the National Hockey League on the short term, but on a long range, they're probably missing a little something.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of those guys that played at the forward position, like who was it? Corey Locke was one of them.
Yeah.
Right? He was a tweener. And there were a couple of others. He probably is a tweener as a goaltender.
Yeah, it's true. And that's, you know what, if you look at it in the context and the big picture, that's not a bad thing. I mean, it shows you how difficult it is to get to the National Hockey League. It's like my buddy Sergio Messo and yours too always says, it's one thing to get here. It's quite another thing to stay here, dig your heels in and establish yourself. So I'm interested to see what Montembeault's future holds. Nice kid, battled hard, and you hope the best is still ahead for him.
You can watch the Sick Podcast basically on Facebook at the Sick Podcast, on Twitter at the Sick Podcast. Every now and then we go live. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll be notified when we either go live or upload an episode. And once again, follow us on all the social media channels. If you like the podcast, you can always drop us a note and comment, of course, in the comment section on the social media platforms. All right, okay. None of us know this. None of us know what's going on for certain regarding Carey Price, but just your gut feel. I mean, I can sense, obviously, you're concerned. Everyone's concerned in Montreal. You can sense that Kent Hughes is concerned, but what's your gut feel? I mean, a lot of people are wondering if Carey Price is ever going to play another game, and if he does, how many other games will he play for the Montreal Canadiens? He's got 4 years left on his contract. Let me put it to you this way. How many of those 4 years do you think he'll play?
Maybe part of one and not a big part.
Wow.
I don't know anything. I'm not a medical guy, obviously, but if you look, I mean, he had that surgery, was it last August? And then it took all that long to get back in the lineup. And then when he did, the swelling came back. So my feeling is there's going to be another surgery. And because they went that long with the one and with rehab, and it hasn't worked. So, obviously, if they have it, he's going to have to put in a ton of work again. But the more I think of it, there's a lot of miles on those knees. It's not a natural movement position to be in, and he's played a lot. It's just, and I guess the way he approached the team's last game on that Friday when they pounded Florida, he seemed to be at peace if that was his last game. So, and the way he prepared, and it was an excellent question asked to him, did you prepare like it could be your last game? He said yes. To me, that tells me he knows something that we might not.
Let's take a look at the penalty kill numbers. We'll bring it up. Here's the chart. The Montreal Canadiens ranked 27th in the National Hockey League at 75.6%. Then, obviously, your numbers are not going to be great when you have the season that they finished 32nd. But when I take a look at the penalty kill numbers, I think of this. This is part of my explanation for it. Carey Price only played 5 games all season. Shea Weber unofficially retired. Joel Edmondson was hurt. Shea Weber had his worst season of his National Hockey League career. Guys like Phil Deneau went on to another organization. Arturi Lehkonen was traded. Paul Byron was hurt. Yoel Armia had also a terrible season. These are all their key penalty killers, right? And you can add Ben Sherratt to the list, who was also traded at one point. So, they're key members of the penalty kill were either hurt, didn't play much, have very terrible seasons, and or were traded.
And if you're not a Canadiens fan, you can say, okay, you're making excuses, but you're not. That's reality. So then you have players in those spots, in those holes or chairs or what do you want to call them, where they shouldn't really be there. So you might have a guy who's on your first penalty killing unit that maybe at best should be a second unit guy with a half minute to go on the power play. And goaltending obviously is a big part of that too. So it's concerning, Tony, I think, and I can't even remember what the Canadiens penalty kill was last year, but I guess if you looked at it in the regular season overall wasn't great, but they clamped down. Actually, I remember in the playoffs, it was great. It was like, I remember 16 or 17 in a row they had killed. So it's just one of those things that they have to fix, but you're right. So what I'm looking at is, and once the roster gets settled, once the draft the draft and free agency are finished, because there's a lot of trades around the draft. Once they settle on the roster, then you'll get a look at who should be in place to kill penalties. But right now, I mean, if you think about it, what will their defense look like? So if it's Edmondson and Savard and Romanov, if those three are back for sure, are there elite penalty killers there? Borderline. So I don't really expect it to take a huge leap forward next year, but it's going to have to get better at some point.
Let's bring up the power play numbers. And there they are. The Montreal Canadiens, 31st out of 32 teams, just 13.7% on the power play. Then missing a quarterback on the power play. I think that's number one. Yeah. Number two, and in no particular order here, but I expected a lot more from Mike Hoffman on the Canadiens power play.
Yeah, I did too. I think when the season started or before it did, I had visions of like a poor man's Kucherov and Stamkos with he and Caufield. So Caufield at the left circle, Hoffman at the right. He can blast the puck when he gets the chance, but I think that was the main reason they brought him in, to help spark the power play, obviously to give some depth scoring as well. But the thing that's concerning too, Tony, is there a power play quarterback in their system? I don't see it. I don't know enough about all of these guys. I've had people tell me maybe Justin Barron could be a second power play guy. I don't think Jordan Harris shoots the puck well enough to be a number one guy. And those are elite players. If you look at the power play quarterbacks across the league as defensemen, they're usually elite guys. I don't know the Goalie. I don't think he's that guy. So at some point, I think
there's one guy who's ahead of them, but I think he's a ways off from being a Montreal Canadian, if he ever will be.
Okay.
Logan Mailloux.
Oh, yes. And you really shoot the puck, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think I read somewhere, I mean, his slap shot was clocked at one point. He may shoot the puck harder than anyone in the world.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that he could load it up that much. So that's,
yeah. Well,
but as I say,
he's 6'5", 220, eh?
Wow, yeah. I don't know,
that's a strong kid.
He is. So, but as I say these names, there's brighter days ahead. You'd think even if a few of those guys hit and become really good players, are going to be in good shape. But that is always, ever since Markov retired or whatever happened, they've been looking for that guy and they haven't found him yet.
All right, okay. Defense. We didn't get to a report card for the defenseman, but which defensemen get the passing grade and which ones get the failing grade?
Well, the failing grade, you start with Jeff Petrie, who was unrecognizable for much of the season, and you kept waiting for him to turn it around. And really, he was never able to do that. You know, you give Joel Edmondson an incomplete, I think, because he played so little of the season. I'd give Chris Wyman, a passing grade, because I think he gave them everything probably and a little more than they would have hoped. And, he was their power play quarterback, a guy who can move the puck, can't shoot it all that hard. So, give Chris a 65, something like that. Other than that, okay, who am I missing? David Savard. I thought he had a very slow season. So slow start to the season, maybe a little bit of a cup hangover and that sort of thing, a short off season. But I thought he stabilize things in the latter half of the season. So, maybe
if you're the teacher, you probably want to give him a 60 at the end of the year because he tried hard down the stretch to make up for a slow start.
No, it's true. Sort of an E for effort.
The highest grade to Romanov, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't think, let's remember he turned 22 in January. He's still very young, at a tough position to learn. And I didn't think there were that many times where he was just awful and lost the plot for long stretches. I talked with Luke Richardson one night in Calgary, and he said, what we want to get him to do is just be more controlled, like not just stay on your side of the ice, not cross, onto the other side all the time and not chasing the play. Let it come to you.
My wife's like that with me. She wants me to be controlled. She says, you stay on your side of the bed. Yeah. I stay on my side of the bed. Don't reach over. Leave me alone. And
line of tape right down the middle of the bed. I remember
it's been like that for about 25 years. Yeah.
Yes. at least you're still married, Tony. But I think what we'll see is better offense from Romanov in the long term. But yes, he was their best defenseman in my opinion this year.
All right. Okay. The NHL draft lottery goes Tuesday, May 10th. If the Montreal Canadiens get picked number one, you're Dan Robertson, and I know that you haven't seen them all that much, but I know that you talk to anyone who's anyone in hockey. Who are you picking?
I think Shane Wright, and I think he's suffering right now from being the projected number one for so long that holes get picked in his game. And he's not perfect, and none of those guys are. He's also suffering from Connor Bedard-itis. He's not Connor Bedard from what we know, and which isn't that doesn't mean he's not a promising player. So if they draft him, I don't know enough about him, and maybe it has to do with what kind of a training camp he would have. Would he start here next year? That's the problem too with guys like that. What do they have left to accomplish in junior hockey? He couldn't go to the American Hockey League. So, but the point is that if they take him, you'd have to think down the road he could develop into at least a good second line centerman that the Canadians are looking for. So that would make sense to me.
Dan, first time on the podcast for you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Time flies when you're having fun. Hey, can you give us one goal call? I know you're in your off season, but one goal call and just tell everyone that the goal was sick, like the Sick podcast? Can you do that?
I can.
All right.
Turn over at center ice. Who's this? It's Marinaro. Marinaro over the line, drives to the net, shoots and scores. That was sick from Tony Marinaro. Canadians win the game 3-2.
On that note, thanks so much, Dan. It's awesome. We'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Talk to you soon.
There you have it. He's Dan Robertson. I'm Marinaro. Double shift your best players. This podcast is sick.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by 8.6, Intense by Nature, and Lacage. If the last time you went to Lacage was when the Habs won the Cup, it's time you went back to Lacage. The menu will surprise you.